Dead Aid by Dambisa Moyo. The main message of the book is aid is like a drug, and as with any drug, pushers and addicts find it hard to kick the habit. Actually, the question is, but has actually worked? Why so many other developing countries have emerged in prosperity in the last 50 years? Why have many of African countries largely failed or been left behind? We are bombarded with requests to give because the only thing stopping people from dying or having a better life is our generosity. There is a deep, almost unquestioned assumption that the better off have a responsibility to help the poor in this way. Aid is one of the biggest idea of our time. In the 1950s and 1960s, 31 African countries achieved independence from colonial rule, and the future looked bright. The old colonial powers were anxious, however, to retain financial footholds in the countries into which they had poured so many resources, and aid looked like a good way of achieving this. The first is the idea that Africa's abundance of natural resources and good land has not proved a great advantage, in fact, a curse. History shows that countries depending on natural resources will see their economics boom or bust depending on commodity prices. It does not matter a great deal to an African family on the breadline whether it can vote. What matters is whether it can put food on the table, and this requires a growing economy and some stability. What is clear is that democracy is not the prerequisite of economic growth. That aid proponent maintains, she writes, and the one thing economic growth does not need is aid. The International Development Association is a club of developing countries who have been successful, including China, Turkey, Chile, Colombia, South Korea, and Thailand, and in Africa, Botswana. None of these countries have been aid gluttons. Moyo notes all have kept to aid contribution of less than 10% of GDP. Botswana did receive aid of up to 20% of GDP in the 1960s, but its growth and stability, it has 4 times the per capita income of the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, came from economic openness, monetary stability, fiscal discipline in government. By 2000, the share of aid in the national income was only 1.6%. Botswana succeeded, Moyo says, by ceasing to depend on aid. When governments stop bothering to collect taxes because they can rely on aid money, the link between people and state breaks down. Again, I am reading this important sentence. When governments stop bothering to collect taxes because they can rely on aid money, the link between people and state breaks down. A 1997 World Bank study found that 72% of its lending was going to countries that had a poor track record in compliance and in meeting the conditions of loan. Moyo refers to a study by economics Bill Estrelli, which concluded that if Zambia had invested wisely all the aid it had received, its current per capita income would be around $20,000 instead of the 500 it is today. African leaders have a penchant for glory projects, but the greater the projects, Moyo says, the larger the opportunity for leaders to give the contracts to the favored people instead of choosing the best provider. Part of the solution, Moyo contends, is bonds, whereby a country raises money to pay for infrastructure or services from the international market, paying a return on funds invested over a certain period of time. This is, in fact, a healthy appetite for African bonds from pension funds, mutual funds, and private investors. The African bond markets still has a long way to go. In 2015, it was only worth 7 to 8 billion dollars, but offers an alternative to aid, which properly engage countries with the international financial system and increase responsibility. Trade reforms, not aid, would make the world of difference to Africa. So his another idea is this: the government uh, should float bonds instead of getting aid. There has been plenty of criticism of China's role in Africa, principally because it does not attach the labor, environmental, and human right conditions that the World Bank, IMF, and UN bodies invariably tie to aid, grants, and lending. Yet many African leaders prefer to be partners of the Chinese government and Chinese companies rather than debtors being told what to do. Of course, China is self-interested. Moyo notes, compared to the aid agenda, but if average Americans are also benefiting from Chinese investment, who cares? Better than the years of stagnation and decline under the aid paradigm. In fact, African states can choose to do deals with a number of big powers, notably Japan and India, thus seizing control of their destiny. I have never seen a country develop itself through aid or credit. Countries that have developed in Europe, America, Japan, Asian countries like Taiwan, Korea, and Singapore have all believed in free markets. There is no mystery there. Africa took the wrong road after independence.